Hey folks, I picked up this Arbor Freight cement mixer on sale just like everybody else does. If you're looking to buy one, you're reading the reviews on it, you can see that everybody says the assembly instructions are horrendous and awful, and I can testify that they really are the worst I've ever seen. In the box, they give you everything you need. They put all the bolts and screws in packages. They put numbers on them, label them, which really doesn't do you any good because those numbers aren't referenced in the instructions at all. So, mostly without the instructions, I'm going to assemble this, and I'm going to use the bottom-up method. I'm just going to start putting the base together and then work my way up from there. Got some cotter pins, put a couple of washers on both sides of the wheels. Spread that cotter pin out a little bit, and all the wheels are on. Here's a cross member piece that goes between the wheels and then the kickstand. Again, you've got a bolt with a washer that goes through, a lock nut that goes on the back side, and that pretty much is how the whole thing goes together. They've got lock nuts on that don't necessarily need a backup wrench to hold them when you are tightening them up. I typically put these together finger tight until I get everything together. Then I come back in with a socket or drill or something and tighten them down. Alright, so that's all there is to the base. That went together pretty easily. Here's the front of the drum. They give you a gasket that goes between the front and the back part of the drum. They just wad the gasket up and throw it in the box, so it comes pretty wrinkled when you get it. I'm just going to lay the gasket out on the drum here. I'm going to put the bolts through the holes that are already pre-drilled in the gasket and the drum. I'm going to use the bolts to hold that gasket in place. The back side of the drum, probably the heaviest part in the whole box. It's got a couple of mounting holes, bolts that hold it on both sides. So I read a lot of reviews and watched a couple of videos that said I needed to line those arrows up for the beaters inside, to whatever they're called, to line up correctly. But the problem is the stickers that have the arrows, those don't line up. The holes don't line up when you line those arrows up. So I just got as close as I could. So you've got the bolts in on the top, put nuts on the bottom. I'm doing them finger tight, and I'll come back later on. You'll see, tighten them all down. So they've got a position plate. It's held on by a couple of bolts. So this handle that controls the position of the drum, they give you this knockout. Looks about the size of a dime. It goes in, and the bolt pushes against it, and then it in turn pushes against a spring that goes in, and that's kind of the tensioner that holds the lever to the position plate. So when you're putting the lever on, be sure that it engages the position plate properly. So the tighter that bolt goes, the more tension there is on the handle. Once it's all in place, I put a second nut on the back side of it, tighten it down, and I'm calling that good. So to me, this was not readily apparent how these were to be installed. I watched a couple of other videos on how to put these in. The instructions are trash. I mean, it's like a 4-year-old didn't even try. Anyway, the small end goes toward the back or the bottom here. Got a couple of bolts on. There's one bolt on each end. Once everything's installed, tighten them up. I guess these are in correctly. If they're wrong, I'm sure somebody will tell me about it. So here I'm coming back to tighten down all of the 8 bolts and nuts that hold the drum together. Remember, there's that gasket in between them. That wasn't too hard. So the shroud is held on by a couple of bolts. There is a gasket on the back side of the shroud that you need to kind of go around so that the shroud will sit close or right up next to the mounting point. So a couple of bolts, a couple of nuts on the back side, and that's on there pretty good. So here's where the pulley goes on. The shaft there has a key slot in it, just like the pulley does. And it has a key that when it's all put together keeps the pulley attached to the shaft so that they both turn and the pulley doesn't just freewheel on the shaft itself. So once you get the slots lined up, put the key in, politely tap it in, put the retaining bolt and washer back on it. Now we see the pulley is installed. So I had a little trouble with this. They give you a couple of bolts, a couple of pairs of bolts that are very close to the same length, and these are the longer pair of the two. And so I am installing these from the back side, and I'm going to put nuts on the right there next to the shelf, because you don't have to back up the nuts when you tighten those down, which is, you have to do it that way, otherwise you can't get to the nuts once the motor is installed. So I'm going to be honest with you, I did this about 4 times before I got all this set up exactly the way I wanted it. The motor is held on to the shelf by 4 bolts and nuts. Be sure and leave the shelf a little bit loose at this point. Once you get the motor attached to the shelf, you can lift the motor up, the shelf up, and attach the V-belt to the pulley and use the weight of the motor and shelf to set the tension on the belt. Once all that's done, reach in behind there and tighten those bolts down. And all of that works pretty well. On the shroud, they don't give you a plug necessarily to plug the motor in. There's a hole on the side of that black box that I didn't see. Be honest with you, at this point I'm kind of over the mixer. I'm ready to be done with it. Didn't see the hole, and so you see that bolt right there on the left, right there. That is a ground lug that has 1 nut on it, and you're supposed to connect the green wire from the motor to that ground lug so that the whole unit will be grounded. but they don't give you a nut to attach that ground lug, attach it to the ground lug. And I'm going to be honest with you, I'll imagine 95% of all of these go without having that ground lug hooked up to that ground wire. It's at this point I realize I should have run all that wire through the hole in the side of it. But again, I'm over the mixer, I'm ready to be done with it. So I made my own slot. And now I've got a slot. Put the cover back on it and put the shroud on it. After working with this for as long as I did, and I think it's due to just the absolute dreadful quality of the instructions, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't even want to pour concrete after I get this put together. But anyway, we get it put together, get it plugged in, it turns on, it runs, does what it's supposed to do. If I had to do over again, I'd hire the neighbor's kid to come over, give him $50 to put it together, because it was pretty aggravating. And I'm fairly well mechanically inclined, but anyway. That's going to be about all there is to the video. I appreciate you watching. Good luck if you pick one of these up. I'll catch you on the next one.